The angels caught Paula and Gado as she fell through the toxic atmosphere of Lucifer, a planet which Project Eden is looking to unravel the mysteries of and provide hitherto unknown minerals to drastically improve Earth's conditions. But the result of this project were never known, and Benny wants to know why. On the project bases on the moon's Belial and Moloch, the crew are dealing with Paula's death and 5 years of work with little to show. Throw in the doctor saying Paula may have been murdered, and suddenly the project is the very antithesis of its name. Soon, murder and sabotage is rife among Project Eden, with distrust growing among the crew, and an adjudicator named Bishop certain our TARDIS team may be behind it all. Who has betrayed the base, and why have they been working with the Interplanetary Mining Corporation? With angels below the planet's atmosphere, and some of the real demons being in the heavens above, just what did happen around Lucifer in 2157? Hello, and welcome back to Two Broad and Two Deep, the Doctor Who podcast where we talk about the Virgin New Adventures from Time Worm Genesis all the way through to the dying days. I'm your host Anthony. I'm joined as always by Alasdair.
Hello Anthony, how are we doing?
I'm not doing badly at all, actually. Even better because we have a guest.
Hey.
We have joining us, I think, for the first time at least in audio form, but you've seen or heard at least their comments online of our episodes in the past. It's Alex Wilcock. Hello.
Hello Anthony, and thank you for having me on.
It's wonderful to have you. I mean, you've been our reporter on the ground for many episodes on giving us feedback on what you thought of books at the time. But what's been your history with the Virgin New Adventures? Was it something you were following at the time?
Yeah, I got the first one and I read the lot as they came out. I was in my first year at university when they started. So I think they're brilliant. I love them as a whole. That doesn't necessarily mean I love every single book. But last year I tried to make a top 10, and I came up with a list of about 30, which it's much easier to come up with a top 3. There are 3 new adventures which are at the top, but my next list of best is always changing. But you may have noticed that there are about 60 new adventures. So if my top 10 has about 30 in it, there are about 30 that aren't in my top 10. So they're not all quite of the same caliber. I remember reading Time Worm Genesis, and there are a lot of things that were the sort of thing I loved in it, and there are lots of things that put me off it. And I remember at the time really wanting to love it, and I think I would give it about a 5 or 6 out of 10. And then once there'd been lots of others, I was able to relax and go, okay, phew, these are really good. This is awful, but not quite awful. There are still things that I like, decisions I like about it, but a lot of decisions that I really don't. And I think for anyone new to the New Adventures, possibly the biggest single problem, other than paying £300 for copies of some of them, because they've been out of print for so long, is that the very first book is probably the most off-putting for me. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure where to start, but I started with it and I carried on, and there are a lot that I love, and at least every other book I really enjoy, and there aren't any that there's nothing that I like about them, and for me they were very much the continuation of Doctor Who. I was really excited, and also they took Doctor Who into new places, and I viewed myself as a great time for it, because I was at that age where I was starting to question things and expand, and they just had loads of new authors, loads of new ideas, and they were kind of mind expanding, and also expanded a lot of my views of what Doctor Who could be or might be, and eventually they started having the first few queer characters that were obviously LGBTQ rather than various hinted at on screen or in Malcolm Holt novels and things like that. So it was nice to have slightly more representation. And there are some that are still amongst my favourite things ever, and there are others that I look back on fondly. There's also a bit of a feedback loop in that the ones that I like best tends to be the ones that I've reread, whereas the ones that I remember less well, I've probably not read for 20, 25 years, so I'm a bit more hazy on some of them. But it does mean that I feel nicer about the range as a whole because I remember the ones that I've refreshed myself on.
Yeah, no, I think definitely there's been that idea of where is the best place to start. And I don't think anyone, even people who do try to defend Time Worm Genesis, would think that that book is the best place to start a range in any way. But I'm just curious, what about the top three that you've kind of decided are within that mix for you? Like, what are those three that you think, yeah, that's the pinnacle of it?
Well, someone asked me about this recently on another podcast about the New Adventures. Sorry, I've not done any Doctor Who podcasts until this year, and it's 50 years since I started watching Doctor Who when I was 3, and I've suddenly thrown myself into it, and I've become, as many people use the term, a podcast tart. But I had an idea as I was answering his question about that, about if this was Desert Island Discs, which is, for listeners who don't know, a very long-running radio program where people both talk about their life and get a choice of music that they would take away to a desert island and an object, and also one book. But as well as one book, they say, well, you get the Bible and the complete works of Shakespeare because those are the foundations of Western civilization. Those have become a bit more, people don't just have the Bible now. Fortunately, it's come on a bit. But I thought if it was Desert Island New Adventures, everyone would just be given a copy of Time Worm Revelation and Human Nature and Love and War, wouldn't they? Because Paul Cornell is the foundation of New Adventures literature. So I wouldn't have to choose any of those, which is fortunate because I love all three of those, but I don't think any of them would quite be in my top three. My top three would be, and not necessarily in any particular order, but the Also People by Ben Aronovich, which is quite a long way further down the line. Damaged Goods, which I have a completely different instinct about than every other review I've read. Every review says bleak, and I think it's all about hope, which either means that I'm wrong or that everyone else is wrong. So clearly everyone else is wrong, and a lot of it is quite bleak, but it really does it for me. So Damaged Goods by Russell T Davies, and the other one I'm quite nervous about because the third of my favourites is a book by Andy Lane and Jim Mortimore, and it's called Lucifer Rising.
Well, you've came onto the right podcast to extol the virtues of your top three.
Am I wrong, or are you wrong, or do you like it? So who knows?
None of us are wrong because we all believe it's a wonderful book.
Yes.
At least that's what I think.
And there's no bad way of being a fan. Except possibly some pages of Time Worm Genesis. Anyway.
Yes. Well, I've maybe gave my cards away there, but Alasdair, have you read this at the time? Was this something that you perhaps enjoyed as much as Alex has?
Not quite at the time, but quite close to the time, because it was sold to me as, you enjoy Babylon 5, right? Read this. So it was a few years after it was out, once Babylon 5 was up and running, and Andy Lane did a book about Babylon 5, the Babylon Files, and yeah, you can kind of... Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. It's what we've been missing, quite frankly. It's been...
I feel like I have gave my game away about just like from the offset, but yeah, I've again, it's a classic. I've never read it before. I've seen the cover. I feel like a snob for judging a book by its cover in that way, but I judge Jim Mortimer's words more than his art, and Andy Lane's is as well, and I much prefer that. And yeah, I was really enjoying this compared to especially what we've gone through. Like, I don't know if this has been a book that, with 30 years past when this was published in that way, and folk might drop in, without the context of going through this range. After what we've been through in the past, especially 2 episodes, this just felt such a breath of fresh air to be able to read. I very much enjoyed needing to pick this one up after what we've been through, because right now, in terms of where we are, I would say it's in not just my top 3, it might be my top 1 book so far of what we have covered thus far in the podcast.
Yeah, as we were talking about earlier.
Which might be a bold statement, but...
No, but we've said this before, every NE is somebody's favourite, and there's no wrong answer to that. We were talking about this earlier on, and I reckon it's really just Time Worm Revelation that kind of beats us out the top spot for me. This was a lot better than Recent Fair and just stands out amongst the range as a whole. I really, really bloody enjoyed it. In case that hasn't come across yet by me saying I have really enjoyed it lots and lots, it was just... Every other one we've read so far, we've been left wondering, like, when's the Doctor getting here? When's the Doctor getting here? I wasn't looking for him this time. The characters were thought out, they were fleshed out, they had their own motivations, they didn't rankle or clash. It was just... I was having a good time before the Doctor turned up, and I kept having a good time once he appeared. And even Ace going back into full-on Space Fleet mode didn't upset me too much. This is what we should have been reading. It's a relief, Anthony. We've described this before. It was a relief. It was like, thank God we're doing this.
Well, I have to say, one of the reasons I love it is it has one of my favourite introductions to the Doctor that I've ever read or seen. I think both the way that he suddenly comes in and gives the last words at a meeting in the first chapter, and then you get a flashback to when he appears, to when he arrives. I think the flashback is so well written, and it's just delightful. It's the Doctor being so excited to see another corridor. What could be in it? And it's just so well written. So that's one. I think beginnings and endings are really important to me. And I think the middle is great, and it's a good job because it's a very long book. It's the longest new adventure so far as well, though I don't think it's quite the longest eventually. But the opening is great, and the close is really good, and particularly the coda, which we might come on to later. Really, the coda has a big emotional impact on me. But I really love. See if I can pull it out when the Doctor just appears and drops in the word murder. And then you get the TARDIS appearing and the Doctor being so excited. But it's also interesting that the one thing that's in there right at the beginning is there are these things called similarities, which are a recording and interpretation device, and also I think a hint. There are lots of clever hints seeded through the murder mystery, and I wonder if similarities is a clue. It's similarities is obviously based on simulations, but I wonder if it's a clue that singularities is going to be a big thing. So I think that's quite... There are lots of little clever murder mystery things, because I quite like Agatha Christie's and things like that, so I look out for little hints like that. Although I think one of the things that's slightly dated is entering computer instructions by code, which, because it's 1993 and it's just before you got to, was it Windows 95, where everyone started just using much simpler interfaces. But I love that when it first when it shows the flashback to the Doctor's first appearance, one of the things that the similarities do is they try to they're designed to not just show you a recording, but to enhance an interpretation, which is obviously useful if you're an investigator looking at a murder mystery. And there's the heading, set point of view, the Doctor, says command incompatible with system status, and I really like that it both shows that the Doctor is complex, and that there are lots of different Doctors and lots of different ways of playing the Doctor, and it's also an in-joke about Peter Darvill Evans saying you're not allowed to get inside the Doctor's head.
Yeah.
True. I mean, that point I think is really important about like the similarities, and it still has quite a lot of relevance, I guess, today, because it's about the different viewpoints at some points in terms of how that's perceived and how people take in that information. Because even though it's meant to show a recorded version of the truth, because you think that will cover the basis of knowing what the truth is, it can still be manipulated in a way of intonation, in terms of emphasis and effect, and it's a perfect example in terms of still even to this day for things like, say, social media and video evidence of things, like it helps to still like make that point quite timeless in a way, just which felt still a wonderful way to be able to use what technology ideas they have towards the effect of the mystery in that way, in a lot of ways.
Also, in the current era of AI videos, we can have anyone famous saying anything you want, a similarity that can be edited to make you look more or less guilty. That could be a commentary for today. That was so well played for today. It didn't feel as if it was written back in the 90s. It was incredibly relevant and quite, it was so clever. Even Bernice just sitting down and going, right, what if we play it like this? And suddenly the Doctor's gone from being a stone cold murderer to the book bearer of hope. It was clever. It was prescient. It was just, very well played.
Exactly.
And when we're touching on the murders as well, that opening scene of Paula falling to her death in the spacesuit, that's some of the most beautifully written sci-fi I've ever seen in my life. And that's before we even get started. I cared about that woman dying. I actually gave a monkeys about it. It was so well done. And then she became a metaphorical and literal ghost throughout the book, but that didn't take away from her death. It was just, if only this much care and attention been given to other characters in other books.
No, I mean, I think this is my favourite opening of a new adventure that we've read. Maybe even just in terms of Doctor Who novels in general, actually, because it was so evocative. It was seeing her fall through, and even because this book has illustrations throughout it, and it has an illustration of Paula falling through the atmosphere. And I know folk have kind of not exactly enjoyed the illustrations, but that specific one at the beginning of the book of her falling through the atmosphere, I really love. It's a guy, it's Leigh Brinicombe-Wood who's done it, and I do genuinely think it's so evocative as the writing is, and it helps paint that picture. And to have that really captivating idea followed by what essentially is like a perfect pre-credit title sequence thing that you could see in a new series adventure, like that line, Alex, that you were saying about the Doctor saying, he's standing in the doorway and says, well, there's a fifth option, murder. You could see the sort of crash into the credits coming from that, of him just suddenly being unnoticed in the room and announcing another like suspicious way that this could have happened. So it was so evocative in terms of what it was trying to achieve and what it actually kind of inspires in your head to make it a Doctor Who story at the same time.
Agreed, no points.
I quite like the illustrations. I'm not sure that they're not all technically brilliant, but it's partly that this is in a lot of conversation, perhaps, with the Third Doctor, and particularly with Doctor in the Doomsday Weapon, which was, at the time, I hadn't seen Colony in Space, but I'd read the Target novelisation, Doctor in the Doomsday Weapon, and obviously this lifts quite a lot out of that. And that was a very early Target book and has illustrations. And there was a bit of me that I know there were some people saying, "Oh, that's not very grown up, having pictures in the books," and I found it strangely comforting in that it was both expanding on and going in new places, and also that nod back to the past. So, and I've always particularly liked the one of the Doctor juggling in front of Legion, which I think is one of the most fun parts of the book. I mean, some of it's very dark, some of it's very brutal, but there are a lot of funny bits, and I love the characterisation of the Doctor in this. So that picture, I think, sums him up very well.
I kind of, yeah, like you say, I understand some of the feeling about having this within a Doctor Who book, but the issue is that I think some folk who might think that, thinking it's, you know, it's meant to be an adult book these days, it's a Doctor Who book that's trying to be more adult. Andy Lane and Jim Mortimore also get the idea that of adult not just meaning it's got to be, you know, we're going to have more, you know, tits and guns everywhere. Like, it's actually just about the maturity of characters, about the maturity of your writing. And just because it includes images that, out of context, you know, seeing the Seventh Doctor juggle or something like that might seem not as in keeping with what you might think adult means, it still plays the part in this story in terms of the characterization, because it's consistent with, you know, the Doctor is still in this book to a way is cognizant of his manipulative nature, and part of that is also being a clownish figure so that he can get away with stuff, and just because he's being clownish doesn't mean he's not being manipulative in that way. So yeah, I think the images, for the most part, I was not exactly worried or annoyed that they were there, but that first one in particular for me was really evocative of the following through of Paula. Also with Paula, I think as well, it was something I saw in, I want to say, one of the New Zealand fanzines in the 90s on their website, and someone in the review mentioned this idea of Paula almost being like the Laura Palmer of this book.
Yeah, I see that.
And I really like that idea of how she, you know, she haunts, like you said Alasdair, throughout this book. We learn more about her in terms of her lovers, her engagements with figures like the Doctor, you know, and all these quirky characters around it at the same time, like Twin Peaks. So there's an interesting idea there that I quite like of basically trying to do a murder mystery in that style rather than not just the Agatha Christie style of a murder mystery, but the David Lynch version of a murder mystery as well, where it's not just about who killed Paula, it's about also the characters around it.
Yeah, there's something that I can't remember who said it, but someone, I must have read this a long time ago and it stuck with me, that sci-fi murder mysteries are really hard to do well, because murder mysteries are grounded in the world that we know, and you look at, so you understand the setup, and you're looking for discrepancies, and you understand that people might be lying. So you trust the world and you understand the world, but you look at the characters and you don't believe the characters. Whereas in sci-fi, it's all about world building. The world building here is fabulous, and full of huge ideas. But with science fiction, it takes you to different worlds. So you generally trust that what you're told about the world is real. So with a lot of science fiction, you're much less likely to have an unreliable narrator or characters who are lying to you. So you have that tension between, and obviously it doesn't hold true for either genre altogether, but those two, you get that clash of genres, and I think this manages it really well. And there are a lot of really good clues. Though I think there's one odd thing about the murder mystery, which is it's a bit like when Big Finish do murder mysteries. They're not quite as exaggerated, in that Big Finish's problem with murder mysteries is that they have very small casts. So, and this actually has quite a big cast, but it pays attention to quite a small number. So there are loads of names going around, but in focus, there are only a small number of people, so there are relatively few suspects, and it does play fair in that one of the people that is being focused on turns out to be the person who is responsible for the deaths. But sorry, that just came to mind.
But it was Piper that was a murderer, wasn't it? Because she held almost no repercussions in the end. She got to go and retire quietly in the countryside with Miles, and it's like, hold on, didn't she kill a bunch of folk? And it's a mark of how much I enjoyed this book. That's just a minor quibble for me. If this had been in the sea, I'd have been tearing Darvel Evans apart at this point for condoning murder. But here, I'm going to let it slide a wee bit. But I shouldn't.
Yeah, I found the end a bit odd, but in the same way. And what part of it is a lot of it isn't murder. It's a mistake, because she's introduced this computer virus, and again the Doctor has his own computer virus which he has checked and isn't rubbish. But that's a clue as to what's behind a lot of the deaths, and it's actually death by identification, which is again very relevant to today. But then she actually tries to kill the Doctor by this bomb or whatever it is in the conference room, and it kind of, wouldn't it be better if she's just responsible for deaths that she didn't mean to cause, and then she turns into an attempted murderer as well? So I agree with you on that. But
the killing of Cheryl's girlfriend Paula and her husband Sam, I could get behind that being, I didn't realise this was going to happen. But then she actively killed the energy officer and framed it as a suicide. That makes it a lot less.
Forgotten. Sorry, yes, you're quite right.
And that makes it a lot harder to forgive her. You can forgive the first two. You're right, Alex. Absolutely right. The first two are, didn't realise that was going to happen. But the third one is deliberate. And she did try to kill the Doctor. She was unsuccessful, but you would still get done for attempted murder.
Yeah.
It's
there's definitely an issue about how Piper, in this latter half, where the latter half essentially is about a corporate invasion in story, like based under siege of a corporate invasion, that is the primary focus and overrides the natural consequences you would think within a murder mystery, in terms of, the killer getting their comeuppance or whatever, and it almost kind of then has the same idea of Piper as kind of like Absalom Dack in Deceit, in that the negative qualities of Absalom Dack are kind of brushed away because this situation is, it's bigger than just him, and it's all just about the wide implications in this place, and we lose the negative aspects of that character overriding them, which feels more harsh, because we have just read about what she has been doing as the essentially murderer and accomplice of setting off the virus and such, and it's not that she's not without guilt about it. She does seem, when she talks about the virus, an actual sense of guilt about it, in a way that I do think there could have been changes to the ending in terms of how they deal with Legion as a creature, and she could have potentially killed Legion instead, as a way to try and attempt to deal with that guilt, but it does then leave other strands for wanting, such as the Doctor's confronting of him being an arch manipulator and actually trying to take the consequence of what he does for once.
I would take absolutely any other execution of Legion over the one we actually got. That was so undoctorish, it bothered me. He got, I've been a bit of a moral person, I'm going to shoot this guy. Oh, what? No, you're the Doctor. Remember that moment in the first series with Christopher Eccleston where he's got the gun and you actually think he's going to blow someone's head off? And then he goes, nope, never would, and tosses the gun aside. Where was that guy? Where was he?
I think there are a lot of interesting things in there, and some of them don't stick. And you're right, I don't think I'm quite as anti it, but I feel much more conflicted about the Doctor shooting Legion. But again, it's I think there are two big things that this book does, which are trying to confront what the Seventh Doctor and particularly the New Adventures Seventh Doctor has been doing, which do not stick with other writers. And one of them is the Doctor saying, no, I've been manipulating people into doing my dirty work. I should take responsibility for it, which is what the Doctor killing Legion is about. And the other is when you get to the very end, skipping about, and the resolution is, okay, the TARDIS team are all arguing, let's have a solution in a sort of sci-fi version of radical empathy, which I think is quite interesting on the page, and empathy as a solution between them is good, but spoiler to you guys who may not have read everything coming up, if you think that this is going to magically sort them out or scientifically sort them out and they will not be arguing all the time after this, that may not actually happen. But it's interesting as well. And it reminds me, saying that, of Benny has a new look, which, as described, which I don't think anybody liked. So that doesn't last to any other books. But in the next book you're going to read, the Doctor has a one-off new look just for the place that they're visiting, and everyone goes, oh, that sounds cool. So that actually lasts for ages, just because. So it's always, you never know what's gonna carry on through there. I think one reason it occurred to me rereading it this time that hadn't before is that maybe one reason why the Doctor is particularly sort of takes ownership of dealing with Legion is that he sees something of himself in Legion. Before people started wrestling with the reality of the New Adventures, my big wrestling was with the end of Remembrance of the Daleks, and I had a lot of problems with the Doctor blowing up a planet. And you might say, oh, he got someone else to blow up the planet, to which, well, that's all right then. And I wonder if what the Doctor deciding to shoot Legion himself is a correspondence with that. But Legion's a really interesting character and a really interesting alien, but also the reason why he's doing these terrible things is ostensibly that the shadow of the Daleks is falling across this galaxy. And Legion, the reason why all these things are happening is that Legion is doing it because he's justifying doing terrible things to stop the Daleks. And if you go right back to the beginning of the Seventh Doctor as manipulator, he justifies doing all these terrible things to stop the Daleks. So I wonder if that is a deliberate choice, both for the Doctor and for the authors.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was absolutely behind the destruction of Scarrow. I loved that as a character moment. So why am I okay with that, but I'm not okay with the Doctor shooting the guy in the face?
I think it's at one remove. And every time the Doctor gets someone else to do it, it's the Doctor not doing it directly. And the Doctor doing it directly I agree with you, just feels wrong. But that's what this is trying to interrogate. And as I said, I don't think I think the other authors went, yeah.
Yeah.
So
it makes more of an impact, like if this was one of the last Virgin New Adventures, because it feels like a conclusion of an arc to be like, the Doctor to realise, actually, yeah, I have been just manipulating anyone, so I'm just going to just directly kill the villain. You know, I was thinking about, like, with, you know, Stolen Earth, Journey's End, when Davros, you know, states just to the Doctor, like, you have just bred your companions into soldiers throughout these years, and look at them now, look at them all getting ready, gunning to kill in the same way. And I was like, well, could you imagine, you know, Tennant turning around and going, yeah, you're right, they shouldn't be, and then just Tennant shooting Davros in the face or something. Like, that's kind of what this is like, essentially, in terms of how it engages with the Doctor as a manipulator to make his companions soldiers of his war instead. And this is the first instance, I think, of that really kind of being touched on in earnest, and I think it would make more sense as one of the last stories you would do where the Seventh Doctor actually really is around, because you can see it spiral into a sort of, I don't know, Time Lord Victorious like sort of thing, and just having the Seventh Doctor become having that sort of spiraling about himself as some form of like ultimate being that then goes down that route of, you know, what the 10th Doctor did, of thinking he can just be the arbiter of everything down the line. And I just think that's something that would work really well for the 7th Doctor in terms of what has been written here, but should happen in, like, I don't know, like 4 years' time within this book range, not not within the first sort of, you know, 14 books. Yeah.
That's interesting, because obviously we've had the Seventh Doctor and Davros, and that's the example of him doing things by manipulation. But I love most of Russell T Davies's writing. He's one of my favourite Who authors. I really don't like that bit of Journey's End. I think it's like. And you're talking about shooting Davros in the face. It's like the bit in Resurrection of the Daleks where the Doctor is hesitating at shooting Davros in the face, and thinking Ace is the right person to say to the Doctor, "You're a manipulator. Look what you've done." And for the Doctor to go, yeah, okay, you might have a point. Davros is the wrong person for the Doctor not to have a comeback line to. And in both Resurrection and in Journey's End, when Davros says these things, the Doctor says, oh, yeah, I don't really have an answer to that. It's like, you're fucking kidding me. This is fucking Davros. And it's like, oh, I name you the Destroyer of the World. Hang on, aren't you about to destroy the entire universe? And so anyway, but I digress. But that bit always makes me think, if I can understand the Doctor not being able to have an answer for his companions, but when it's Davros, that should be the easiest person to answer in the universe. And the Doctor gets tongue-tied and thinking,
yeah. Tennant should have just shot him in the face. That would have got it over with quicker.
I agree. Shooting him in the face just feels very wrong.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess, you know, we're mentioning there just in terms of Ace calling him out in this. It comes from Ace being the actual person who does out manipulate the Doctor in this. For the first time, we see a companion properly kind of take the carpet under the feet of the Doctor in a way that I found really, really great for Ace in terms of what we've experienced of her in this past 2 books or so with Deceit. But the issue, I think, again, is that this would be the perfect one to do when you're ending that Ace arc and have her basically be, you know, rejected by the Doctor in response to what he's learned in a sort of, you know, like Mike in Invasion of the Dinosaurs sort of way. Like having that sort of like clean cut saying, right, this you've clearly learned your lessons and decided to work to the opposite of what I am. No more, you're out. But yeah, it's How did you find Ace as a character within this book? Alistair, how did you find it actually compared to actually last book as well? Because, this is where we start this sort of space ace story, and yeah.
Sorry, just...
Yeah.
It was... Yeah, I'm sighing an awful lot. There's a reason for this. Sighing kind of covers where I'm feeling on this. It was the whole... I'm all for Ace manipulating the Doctor, getting her own back, having her own agenda. But the idea of plotting with IMC to go back with the Doctor should she ever find him and go back and do this particular thing at a particular time is like... No, that doesn't really fly. We've established that you're a grunt, that you're a soldier, that you don't hesitate to do the gritty, terrible things. Don't be waging a secret time war. We've already got one guy doing that in this line of books. We don't need a second person doing it. And I just... No, it didn't work for me. I know she's still better than last time. Miles better than last time, but still... No, this isn't working for me. This is... But there was nice moments. I mean, that point where she's in her room basically having a small breakdown and Benny comes in and going, "Are you okay?" And she goes, "No, I'm not. Fuck off." And Benny does the human decent thing and doesn't fuck off. That was brilliant. That I loved. A wee bit more of that would be great. But then we got that. I'm vulnerable. I don't know what I'm going to do. Yes, I do. I'm going to kidnap everybody and shoot them in the face. And then when the Doctor gets in my way, I'll give him a gun and he'll shoot the alien in the face for me. It's like, no. It almost had nuance. It's just... But weirdly, she fitted in really well to the last section of the book when all the adjudicators are coming on board and running havoc. Ace fitted right in there. And that kind of worked. Just, it bothered me how she got to that point. But, yeah. That's where I am in Ace.
Well, it's 30 odd years later, and I'm still conflicted about the return of Ace. But I think there are some interesting things that they try to do, and there are some books where it works and some books where she doesn't. And Benny is usually much more engaging as a companion. But I quite liked. I was at uni at the time, and there's, I can't remember if I knew at the time this idea that. Of the elements of the Cartmel Master Plan, one that really wasn't used in the New Adventures and is, or was used in a very different way, is this idea that the Doctor wanted Ace to go off to one of the Time Lord academies and learn how to be a Time Lord, and obviously she goes off in a completely different direction, but she still goes off and learns how to be something else, and it's kind of as if. Because I was at uni at the time, so it's like instead of it's Ace's parents had expected her to go off to uni and come back all well behaved and become a doctor, and instead she goes off and gets a job and comes back really aggressive, and there's an element of that, and I quite like the straining against the idea that she was just going to be what the Doctor expected, and I think given that she's come back as this. The twistiness of the first book where she comes back, I quite enjoy that she's got a different agenda and she's still trying to make up her mind, because a lot of us were reading it and still trying to make up our minds about her. There is one bit which, when I read it this time, I thought, oh no, and then I thought, no, actually this is a joke about how the New Adventures have been, which is it's page 70. Which at least it's not page 69, but it starts with Ace was naked, and I just thought, oh, it's another of those. And then it's Ace was naked, gouging at a man's chest with a knife, and that's all we hear. There are no salivating descriptions, and she says, "It wasn't like this," she yelled, knowing it was a nightmare but unable to break the spell. And I thought, that's just a gag about all these scenes, and it's the only scene like that and it's just Ace is having a nightmare where authors are making her get naked all the time to perv over her. And I thought, okay, that's quite funny. And similarly, although she's there are a lot of, I think, quite carefully written contrasts. So we have her, she's trained military, and you think, well, she's just shooting everything. But we're introduced to a lot of her military skills through the sort of disaster movie chapter.
Yeah.
Where instead of killing people, she is using her finely honed skills to try and save lives. She is really practical and on the ball, and I really like that use of she's actually saving people by being super practical. And then when she's taken by IMC, there's this very Doctor Who, I thought, very old-fashioned Doctor Who, sort of Robert Holmes change to keep a six-parter moving, where it suddenly switches to almost a different story when the IMC people turn up, and you get these horrible, very very 80s macho men and women, all very macho killers, and you can see Ace is not like them. So it's saying, well, you might think this is the sort of thing Ace has been turned into, but she is more nuanced. She is not the same as those. And that you get again, reading it this time, I was looking at their names, which I'm now going to try and find in my notes. And if I'm very lucky, I might have them somewhere. Where I've just found from the back cover, which also made me laugh, Ace is back and she is not in a good mood, which again I thought that's funny. But the first three that we're introduced to are called Krieg, Ardamol and Dommer, and I don't know if Ardamol and Dommer are real names, but Krieg means war. So that's quite unsubtle, and I thought Ardamol and Dommer, you might be able to pronounce those as Dammal and Dammer. So they're just war and sweariness, and that Dommer is we see him being obsessed with his gun and constantly taking his gun to pieces and reassembling it, and then it blows up because he's crap. And I thought, okay, that's saying these really 80s violent people are actually horrible and useless. So I kind of like that, and that being a contrast with Ace. So I think this book at least does treat her with more subtlety by juxtaposing her with other things, and also not just being one skill set of I'm Ace and I'm going to kill people.
I'd actually forgotten about the disaster movie segment. That, you're right, that was a much better use of her. That was...
Yep.
It was quite tense, wasn't it, the whole thing? You actually cared about the people that were involved.
Yeah, like that's one part of the book that I think does very well, is caring for the supporting characters within this book, but also when there's tension getting ramped up. It's a particular thing that happens at that particular scene on the lift in the bridge, but also later on when folk are changing through the morphic fields and such. There's short, snappy paragraphs cutting from one person to the next person to the next person to the next person, and it's just like it's a very, very well done ramping up of tension that I really did enjoy reading, because it actually, like I was saying earlier, this is one of the few books I actually was excited reading about. It got me enthralled and caught into this world, and then caring about what was happening in these very small, short paragraphs of action in a way that made use of the form of what they're doing within the book, and not just have it as a as a big slog of text that might get lost within the actual forming of the page.
Then there was Bannon as a character, who you're obviously meant to dislike, and is obviously doing the big stupid things to make all the terrible things happen. But then you get that wee bit about him abandoning Earth and leaving his wife and child behind, and you're actually sat there going, oh, that poor man. It's like he's actively abandoned his kid, but they write it in such a way you care that he's left his wife and child behind. And I still don't like him as a character throughout the book, but they humanised him, and it was...
There is a theme throughout it about kind of parental figures, parenthood, as well, that I did kind of want to touch on, because there's, that aspect when it comes to Bannon having a similarity of his child that he left during the food riots on that planet, but also with how, is it Christine whose mother is the Earth president?
Yes.
As well, and how
Christine
the betrayal
Lafayette, yep.
that her mother provides, and I think I can't remember the word she uses to describe her daughter, but it's literally something like the product or something like that.
A commodity or something like that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, like instead of it being an actual human, an actual child of hers, it's reduced to such clinical language. That there's the theme as well with Paula talking about Miles' his wife and the lack of love that they seem to have had with each other there, and the unfaithfulness of that figure that kind of broke their love, and Piper kind of feeling almost like maternal in some ways about Paula, despite the fact she kind of killed her.
Yeah.
To that extent, Ace as well. I mean, with the literal her actual father in a sort of dream style memory sequence, is on the deathbed and is literally forming into the Doctor, getting the jumper on in a hospital bed and stuff like this. Like there's a lot of bleeding of themes about parental figures and the unstableness of them for some, and the use of it as a sort of coping mechanism for the situations they might be in others. And it's a surprising theme I didn't actually think about until kind of a bit later, of just how many kind of parental relations are kind of fleshed out in this book. But that's the thing, so many relations are fleshed out in this book.
And speaking of fleshed out, it was nice to have Benny back. This is the first time since Living Wharfs he was actually recognisable as Benny. And it was like, oh, where have you been? It was just...
I think it was like peak Benny performance of her being in that food dispenser. Like, this just felt pure distilled Benny.
I was absolutely gutting myself at that.
I love the scene in the food dispenser.
Yeah.
It was joyful, and even then, but then she had some really nice emotional moments as well, like going talking to Cheryl again. I'm really sorry, I told the Doctor that you were having an affair with Paula, and you could feel the genuine regret. And can I just say how nice it was to have a character in there that was blatantly bisexual, but that wasn't crowed about, wasn't fanfare, that was just, this is who she is, let's keep moving. It was, we compare that to the evil space lesbians in the last book, it was so refreshing. It was just nicely done. It was,
I think I kind of give that sort of 3/4 marks on there, because and there are two books very, very close to the end of the range, which really go for gay characters, and there are lots of throwaway ones, or several throwaway ones before then. And I think the problem I have here is that I was slightly taken aback when you get to Cheryl saying that she and Paula had been together before she met Sam, and it's kind of all the way through it's treated as if Paula is the affair because she's married to Sam, and it's actually that she was kind of cheating on Paula with Sam, but then she gets married to Sam, and it felt slightly as if they were trying to do it right, but they couldn't quite get their heads off the idea that, this is a revelation, so that must be the affair. But it's like, no, it's the wrong way around. If you're with one person first and they're on the ship with you, then you ought to have been married to Paula and you were cheating with Sam or something like that, or they both knew about each other, and so that one bit just slightly jarred with me. And I think it's just because at the time, TV and murder mysteries wouldn't have that many gay or bisexual characters, and it would tend to be the revelation is, here's the thing that you weren't quite expecting, and it's a little bit like the it's a woman. It's sort of 20 years earlier. Um, but I do think, other than that time way round, it's quite deftly handled, and particularly with Paula at least. And again, I like that as you say, it's not accepting that assumption. It's relatively matter of fact. It's not negative, but that's one bit that made me think. But I do think it's a brilliant book. But I can always find something to complain about, because I'm a fan, and that's what we do.
I'm a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah.
This is what we do. You're right. It's
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, there's the theme of this being quite a multicultural and varied base throughout the book in a lot of ways, just in terms of, you know, characters that we have, like we were talking about with the energy engineer being like a Muslim woman, and that playing into the kind of mud in different ways, and, you know, characters from different nationalities, including, I have to say, a Scottish person. I think this may be the first time we have a Scottish person in a Virgin New Adventure. I wrote down her name. Where is she?
McBride.
Yes, Rachel McBride. She was I think she was described as doer. I don't want to jinx or defame, but I think she was seen as a very, like, broad stroke Scottish person. But I'm glad she's there.
She was described as doer, but I wrote something else about her as well, because there's a I love the New Adventures. One of the things about the New Adventures as a whole that I have a problem with, and this is coming back to Ace, is that on screen I think Ace's sexuality and gender identity is a lot more fluid and open to lots of different interpretations. And in the New Adventures, she is very heterosexual, and she's often shamed for it, which I think is a problem. And one of the few times that there are hints that Ace might be bi in the New Adventures is actually here, where she notices that McBride has a pretty laugh. So she might be doer, but she also has a pretty laugh.
Yeah.
And I thought, possibly they've noticed that Ace has lots of very very homosocial relations on screen with different women. So
true. Like, I mean, that it's difficult with Ace in this book in terms of what we've experienced before with her, because, like, in Deceit, for example, when she first comes back, she uses her herself to the advantage of what she's doing with, like, that guy she takes the chip out of and you know, exploits him, but there's a level of emotional detachment that she doesn't want to break with people in this book. Like, she still tries to be very so, like we were saying, militaristic soldiery in a lot of her mindset still, because, like, even when we were talking about, you know, the kind of discussions Benny and Ace have, you know, there's a really great scene where they're talking about, you know, Ace as a soldier and why she's off to fight the Daleks, and she thought she'd be feeling much better about killing all these Daleks, and she ends up feeling pity for a Dalek that just obliterated a whole entire ship of people. And the feeling of confused and mixed emotions, she just about says to Benny, but as soon as Benny tries to broach a bit more onto it, she shuts down and does not want to engage with Benny. Almost again like this sort of, like, the paternal figure sides of things that we're talking about, like her having this discussion with an older woman about how she feels is not something that we get with Ace a lot, and it's shut down quite quickly because she's not used to that situation and scenario, given her military experiences over the past, like, 3 years or whatever. So it's interesting how it can be there behind the facade of Space Ace. Like, she still has she still wants to talk to people about how she feels and the emotions that she's, going through and the turmoil that it brings her. I did want to mention as well about, Benny and this, and I think it's something that I think many Doctor Who fans in retrospect might well just apply to Space New Ace in a lot of ways, was, Benny getting a lot of hate and anger from Ace, and she says that it's not you I hate, it's just what you've became. And it's a bit, for me, a bit premature to be saying that, because I don't fully hate what she's become in this book. I just dare say I don't think it can stick around in that way, because an attitude like that to your other companion really should build up to the conclusion that she then goes, because she has got to such a different dynamic in her head about how to do things, how to be, that she's not compatible with the Doctor, even in his manipulative ways in the Virgin New Adventures. Should be, this should be the breaking point, and it's just kind of not. It's like what we were saying earlier, I guess, about the lack of repercussions for Piper being the killer and such. There's the lack of repercussions of Ace betraying the Doctor, out manipulating him. That is an issue in this book for me still.
Yeah, and it's, we have seen it in modern Who. Of course, Clara betrayed the Doctor and got a lovely wee speech about how she could never do anything that would stop her from being loyal to her and wanting to help her, but they missed that opportunity here. There was no, it's okay, Ace, I know what you're really like. It was like, okay, so you tried to hijack my personal timeline and kill a bunch of folk, and I shot someone in the face, but it's fine. We'll all join together, share a memory, and we'll all be fine. There was potential there. They just kind of squandered, but we're saying all this, still loved this book. Still,
exactly.
Still really enjoyed it, but it's proper nitpicking now rather than this is crap, that's crap. Here's why this is mince. There's little bits that jar slightly, but it's little bits.
Well, exactly.
Like the rabbi.
I mean, talking of things that we then do enjoy.
He was a walking stereotype. He even called him a rabbi. How can we make sure everyone knows he's Jewish? We'll make him a rabbi and give him a skill cap. And we'll use the word sugar at every possible. It's like,
yes.
And does he say oy vey at some point?
Yes. I think, yeah. I we've had way back in the Troughton era, they used to do people with different nationalities, and they'd all be men, but you'd have one black one and one wearing a French neckerchief. And I think this is trying hard to do the same sort of thing, but with slightly more depth. And some of it is slightly overdoing it. One thing I do like about the Jewish character is that although the second time we see him, it's making it as obvious that he's Jewish as you possibly can, and that's slightly with a trowel. One thing I like is that the first time we meet him, he has his own quirks and character that are nothing to do with that. So it's not just making him, he is the Jewish character. And I'm trying to think, I can only think of two Jewish, we may have had more, but two Jewish characters we had on screen before this, and I'm not sure how many there've been in the New Adventures. So it's well, let's actually try for once. And I know that a lot of them are over-egged.
I think for the time,
but I think on screen.
So I think at the time it was a worthy effort, and I think we're looking at it for the benefit of hindsight, and we've moved forward a huge way in terms of representation and diversity. It's just, it looks bad through current eyes. It was probably quite progressive at the time. Oy vey.
Yeah, I mean, I think they spend a lot more time on the Tewa people, and legends and history and things like that. But I'm just realising that one of the only two Jewish characters I can think in Doctor Who is written by a New Adventures writer, which is Ben Aronovich. So that was extremely late in Doctor Who as well. But it's nice to have a lot of different cultures who are more than just a flag, even though sometimes they're just a let's have a cultural quirk. But I think part of it I forgive slightly because this book is a lot of it's about religion, and almost having people's religions mentioned all the time is a clue, because the answer to a lot of it is what humans have called the angels and what humans have called the planet Lucifer, and it's actually about their religion.
Yeah.
A lot of the sci-fi answer to it at the end, and it's not just doing one religion, because a lot of Doctor Who has just been kind of not exactly monocultural, but it hasn't been going out of its way up until this time to have other than basic white middle class British assumed Church of England characters. So religion is partly there as a clue, and I like that there are clues, even if sometimes they're a bit ham-fisted. One of the things I like less about it is that there are slightly too many continuity references, and some of them I just go, really? And some of them are quite entertaining. A lot of them are very entertaining, but sometimes I can do with fewer. And then when you get to the IMC killers in their bunk room, all talking about how much they like killing things. The room is made out of duralinium, which is the metal that everyone is after in Colony in Space or the Doomsday Weapon, and I thought, okay, some of the continuity references are a bit like in Agatha Christie, where you get a paragraph that's kind of a shopping list, and it mentions 10 things, and the third and the seventh are actually crucial to the plot. And it's like, well, okay, so mentioning duralinium is actually before IMC's been mentioned. So it's, this is about IMC. So it might be that the continuity references are partly there to be indulgent, but they're also there as chaff, that somewhere in there you go, oh, actually, some of these are clues.
Well, I think there's a fair amount of chaff still. I mean, like, I did not need to know that the Delphons amputate each other for sexual gratification. Like, yeah, sure, that we'll get to the punchline about how that raises a few eyebrows, but like, there's not really a lot of need for a lot of the references. It doesn't detract, I have to say, but yeah, there's a lot of chaff of it.
One and one is three. My bad angel, that's ever me.
We were talking about the angels actually, and I was wondering if, like, how you found how they were threaded throughout the book, like, as not a threat in any way, but like as a presence within this book, and what you felt, how impactful they were as characters within this book, and how what they kind of, you know, represented to be as a sort of parallel to what was happening on the base, as it were.
I quite enjoyed them, but they were very much, it almost felt as if they had their own thing going on. Like when one of them had merged with Paula and they were bringing it her life cycle full cycle, and she was degrading back down to whatever it was she was degrading into. It almost felt as if they had their own story going on, and our protagonists were almost background characters in their story. And a very Babylon 5 feel to them, I felt.
I agree with you, though. This is pre-Babylon 5,
yeah,
which, again, it's one of those where I kept thinking this is going to be a Babylon 5 influence thing. And I think when this came out, when this was published, it was only a couple of months after The Gathering. The pilot had been on screen. So it's actually prefiguring most of what's happening. But yeah, I agree with you. I think we mostly get the angels through Paula. Or, well, no, I was going to... we partly get it in terms of characters. We mostly get them through Paula. What we really get them through is their technology, and I really liked a lot of the both the religious ideas, but also the technological ideas, and the mystery of how it works, and the emotional controls, and I thought that was really interesting. But also the particularly when IMC arrives and just starts saying, "Oh well, we don't need all these people, so let's just kill them," and we don't need. And there's one really chilling moment where they just say, "Oh, they're not dead. In fact, all the deaths were our heavily armed soldiers. They were the only casualties because all these unarmed scientists just turned on them." And that seemed very out of today's news, honestly. But also that they just decide that the what they think is wildlife and what they think is vegetation is entirely unnecessary. Let's just burn it down, and that really that was very powerful in terms of its. And it was an obvious message, but it was, you think you really shouldn't be doing that, and then the climax of the book rushes towards you. You go, "Oh, you really shouldn't have been doing that."
Yeah, like it's very unsubtle in terms of like the phrasing of how it uses and describes what it is doing to essentially pillage the planet for corporate greed. As this, it is a corporate invasion in that way, but it's interesting how, like, the folk who are based on that base are wanting to find the resources and work in collaboration with the angels to essentially have something that can be the saviour of Earth and the Earth, surrounding areas, to make them have a better life. Whilst it almost feels like the angels kind of are anticipating that side of things. It's maybe one of the more bleaker points, I guess, instead of and therefore consistent with the New Adventures, in that they anticipate that the corporate greed and that nature within humanity will come and try to pillage them in a way that they can take advantage of. In the same way that we were saying about
it's everybody
Ace.
Manipulating everybody else, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the same way that we Ace is able to out manipulate because she knows the nature of the Doctor. The angels are able to perhaps out manipulate humanity writ large rather than just one group, because they know humanity will find ways to have people they work with to just exploit other people, and provide those black holes to the planet to be able to suck away their system. Now, that whole image itself I thought was great, about the black holes, taking the atmosphere physically at these small singularity points. It was visually very arresting, very, very graphic, as is many things through this book. So it was, to me, it was just as visceral and graphic as the exploding bodies and blood on the bridge and the lift. Like it, there's a lot of very striking imagery throughout this, and having the angels be able to like engage with something in a way that they're not called manipulators by anyone. They're just walked away from by everyone involved, because it's such an overwhelming power that they just don't want to engage with. But there's a nature of amoralism perhaps from them, in that they can still outsmart humanity even at its most corporate, greedy worst.
There's two things you've just said there that made me think of a particular bit.
Yep.
The bit on the bit you mentioned, the bit where the bridge collapses, which is the sort of disaster movie chapter. And disaster movies aren't really my thing, but I thought that was really gripping. I thought it was a really well written chapter, and there are several bits about it. We've had him mentioned before, but we suddenly get to know Jesus, who's the point of view character.
Yeah.
And weirdly, there are at least two deaths in it, but I'd forgotten he dies at the end of the chapter, so that was a bit of a for me. But the death that I'd remembered was the guy with the big beard.
Yes.
Which for some reason that always stuck with me because I've had thank you. I've had beards on and off since I was about 16, and I'd not read this for about, I guess, 15 years before this time, and so in COVID. After a few months, I'm really bad at trimming my beard, so I get the barber to do it when I get a haircut. And after a few months of not having a haircut or a beard trim, I was really aware that my COVID mask was being pushed away from my face. And every time I put my mask on, I thought of Yukio, Yukio dying in the bridge. So that had really stuck with me. So I think that's a really really well written chapter. But there's one bit where Jesus has an internal monologue which you can see why it's given to him, but in most books I think it would probably been given to Benny, where he's thinking about how the aliens are gone and they were history, and he says the thought saddened him. They must have been such wonderful beings, and now even the legacy of their environment was being rewritten by the humans. Changed with every curved floor covered by a flat grill, every piece of art ripped from the walls and studied out of context, every subtle nuance of space filled with metal and plastic, neural net cabinets, stores, machinery, even people, and thinking that's a sort of archaeologist point of view. But you were talking about how we never really get to understand the angels, and that the humans want to, or particularly the IMC, but even the Eden Project want to exploit them. And Jesus felt a gentle sense of irony steal over him. They'd come here to learn, but it seemed all they would ever learn was how to alter that which they had no possibility of understanding into something that's so familiar there was no point in their understanding it. And that really got to me. So you reminded me of that, and and fortunately I had that chapter bookmarked, so I was able to find it.
No, that's a very accurate quote about the approach to the angels that humanity ought to take. But
and I will say, having worked in labs, having worked in clean rooms, having worked in areas where I needed to wear the dawn breathing apparatus, death by beard struck me quite hard, because I've had that lecture and been told about how well to keep my beard, and that a poorly maintained beard could literally be the death of you. It was like, okay, so I think I know who wrote this one.
Yeah. I mean, having that beard made us make this book have, perhaps for the first time, two masters be referenced in this book, in the range, given that later on in the dream sequence we have the wee boy talking to talking on Gallifrey, which I think is the master, but also that Yukio's beard is based on W.G. Grace from Black Orchids, who is referred to as the Master.
What he's famous for, yes.
So, two masters in one book. It's the first multi-master story we've got. Wild Enough in Time can be in the rubble whilst we have Lucifer Rising doing a multi-master story first.
Your doctor substitute has made your score almost respectable, Charles.
Perfectly ripping performance.
And yeah, talking of that memory sequence, how did you find that, of the idea of dealing with all these sort of fields going to pot and the Doctor, Ace and Benny merging into one being to troll each other's minds?
I think it's, as I said earlier, it's trying to sort out the arguments in the TARDIS, and it's not the right way to go about it, because you should do it through character and not through mechanics. But these two authors are really good with character, and I think how it's written in this book really works. And I like the idea of emotional control for things. And again, there's a clue in it where the Norwegian guy is interested unsurprisingly, in ancient mythology, and compares the bridge to Bifrost. But he also, there's this clue where he's the one who can feel the bridge coming, and I think the implication is he's kind of the emotionally sorted guy, and that's a clue that it's because he's the calm one who's much more in touch with his emotions. It's the clue about that's part of the control
Yeah.
mechanism. And also that even though it might not last, it is telling us, the Doctor and Ace and Benny are kind of crucked up, man.
I liked it from the point of view it accentuated how alien the technology was. This wasn't going to be a push button solution. This wasn't a pull this lever. This wasn't get to this point in the universe. It was, we're going to have to use our emotions like we would use our hands to switch this thing off. That was a nice concept, and dealing into the whole the parental aspect of it was really nice as well, because each of them had a different parental experience, and it was interesting that Ace saw her dad transmute into the Doctor, and Benny's parents stayed Benny's parents. It gave a nice wee barometer for where they both were in terms of travelling with the Doctor. And of course the Doctor, who we know was loomed, the closest thing he's got to a parental figure is the Hermit on the Hill. And then the absolute betrayal of, hold on, you had other students, I was taken a wee bit by surprise by that. It was it was nicely done. Because we all treat the Doctor as if he's special and unique amongst Gallifreyans.
You saying that suddenly made me realise it's kind of like a lot of new series, or several new series, Doctor Who companions suddenly finding out that the Doctor has had other companions, isn't it?
Yeah.
Except that's the Doctor's version.
Yeah, it's like the Doctor, we've been sold the idea that the Doctor's special and unique amongst Time Lords, and it was something quite amusing to think that the Doctor thought the same about himself in this. I thought I was the only one. No. There are others. And it was interesting you thought it was the Master. I wasn't sure if I thought it was probably meant to be the Master, but I thought it was open to being like possibly the monk or someone else, but the Master makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, it could well be anyone. That you wish it to be. I just decided. I think it was the natural assumption, but I did like that idea of him being affronted that he's not as special as he thought he was. Which in itself, actually, like we were talking earlier about, the new adventures and how it tries to paint the Doctor as more than just a Time Lord. He's a special boy. Like this is almost kind of a small jibe at that by saying, nah, he's actually just one of many, and he's just rogue like many of the others. But that's his path of roguery. There's others that exist as well, and he just needs to learn the act of. I think is it the act like humble, learning how to be humble. I think is what the Hermit asks him to go away and learn. So there's, perhaps lessons in the Hermit that we can hope that writers in the future will take away.
Sign up now for a career with the Interplanetary Mining Corporation. Grow a mustache and see the stars.
So I don't know. Did anyone have any other notes about the book that they wanted to kind of talk about? Because there's a lot. I mean, I don't think we've even said about how it's nearly 350 pages, the longest one we've done so far. So there's a lot in this that I can imagine a lot of people have squeezed out of. But did anyone else have anything they wish to bring up to it?
I've got a few things. I liked the Doctor and Bishop as kind of dueling Columbos. And that one of the sort of shock twists is when it's sort of changed genre in kind of the last third, like a Bob Holmes, or kind of like the like a Russell T Davies two-parter, where the two episodes are in different genres, and I had remembered this, but I still remember that it was a shock first time, that it opens with Bishop, the adjudicator, kind of almost as the point of view character and investigating everything. So you see him as, well, he's the detective. He's almost omniscient. He'll be seeing everything out. And it was a shock when he gets killed,
Yeah.
because it's suddenly switched genre, and so you don't kill Poirot, you don't kill Sherlock Holmes
Well,
or Columbo, but suddenly that happened. So that was a bit of a whiplash. But I thought he was quite well done, and also a bit of a git.
yes.
But
Well, interesting. I was reading earlier on. He was kind of based. He was meant to be Judge Dredd originally. This was going to be a crossover book, and that changed reasonably late on in the day.
oh,
And you can actually see some of his dialogue
Yeah.
is absolutely ripped from Judge Dredd.
okay.
I had read about that and I wasn't sure until there's that bit. I think someone's questioning. I think it's his previous adjudicator saying that you're holding yourself up to some form of moral standards when you have murdered people, and he's like, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, what about these scores of drug users on this planet? He's like, they were a waste of people. What about these impoverished people here? And he's like, nah, they don't count. They're not people. There's a level of executionism towards them of being like Judge Dredd in some ways, but yeah.
Yeah, I kind of got more Travis from Blake Seven there, actually. but having said that, he's quite likable some of the time. But I thought it worked as a conclusion to the future histories. I can't remember if you've talked about these, but there are about half a dozen sort of sets of new adventures that form kind of almost seasons if they were TV Doctor Who, and I think this is by far the best of the Future Histories cycle. But it's also it's the last, and it kind of makes it feel like it's much more than some of the others. Like it's made this cohesive idea of Earth history going into the future. But one of the things I really like about that is that it's also seen as an historical, because it's seen from the perspective of these are things we know happened several hundred years ago, and we don't quite know what went on, so we're going back to find out. And I love lots of different types of Doctor Who and lots of different settings and periods, but for me the most definitive kind of Doctor Who story is to go back into history and meet the sort of people that you might expect in history, and outer space people that you really wouldn't. And I love when occasionally you get an alien planet or a future setting that has the feel of a doomed historical, even though it's on an alien planet or set in the future. And I think that feels very Doctor Who to me, and I think that's one of the reasons that I like this one so much, that it has that historical feeling, even though it's set in 2154. That part of that history is the shadow of the Daleks. I have this theory that the shadow, partly because they're not allowed to use them, the shadow of the Daleks keeps falling over the new adventures without them ever quite being there. This is one of the most blatant about it. It's even got a picture of a Dalek. It's not a picture of a Dalek. It's just a cloud in a particular shape. And I find the coda really moving. It's one of my favourite bits in any new adventure, where Miles and Piper, even though that's problematic, have returned to Earth, and I suppose addressing the problematic bit, he hugs her and says, "We must live for the future," which is about, okay, we'll let these things go. But part of living for the future is that Piper reaches into her tunic and she takes out a little packet that the Doctor's given her. She pulled it from her pocket and unwrapped it. The small grains of powder seemed to glow of their own accord. "What's that?" Miles asked as she held the paper up. Piper remembered what the doctor had told her and suddenly grinned. "Hope," she said, as the powder was carried away from them, like a flurry of sparks upon the wind. And that's always stayed with me. I find it really moving. It's partly the Doctor cheating and giving a tiny bit of hope against fighting back in a tiny way against all the Dalek viruses that are part of the attack of the Dalek invasion of Earth. And you get this terrible, threatening presence that nobody knows about that is unnamed for most of it, a Dalek fleet moving against lots of planets. And one of my other favourite new adventures has a very similar coda, which has an almost unbearably moving hope, and that has an even more powerful emotional impact on me like nothing else I've ever read. And that's just a tiny bit at the very end of Damaged Goods, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. but I wonder if it was inspired by this. But the Damaged Goods bit is even more meaningful. But I love that it's a use of Doctor Who's own history and a use of the Daleks that isn't just let's have pages and pages of Daleks shooting people or whatever you could do if you had Daleks there. And it makes them, for me, feel, and Doctor Who's own history feel more powerful through not actually doing it directly.
Yeah.
So that bit I love. So.
Yeah, it has got that area of hope within it that we don't often get within that previous 6 run in terms of the cynicism of the world, which does exist in this in terms of the corporate greed, things like that. But that ending note of hope is important. I don't have that note of hope, unfortunately, of one of my last few notes, because I'm wanting to talk about the pit again.
Oh,
We're going back into the pit, down to pit, which, by the way, there is a pit in this story, at least, first of all, which has more pits than the pit, which is very helpful. And I was thinking about the pit when the pit appears in this, but also just in terms of how in the pit Benny wants to see that history, like we were saying there, on what happened at this particular time, at this particular space that she heard about in the past. And the terrible conclusion as to why that happened in that universe, in the pit story. Like, the pit and how absolutely tedious the world building was about trying to give that perception of this thing that is ultimately doomed, like this small cluster of things are doomed, gave no sense of hope, gave no sense of a world that was worth saving in a lot of ways, but in contrast to the same structures of what, as a skeleton, you want to do in this book. Like, Benny, technically on paper, wants the Doctor to take her back to see what just happened at this project and what kind of transpired here. And then you see the skeleton of a world that is not doomed, as it were. There is a settlement that wants to, learn about things to advance the betterment of society. And there's debates and fractured discussions about how best to do that. Who's so much discussion in this book is about allocation of money and budget setting for like different departments within the first half of this book, and it's great because it shows you in space what this actually looks like, how this is functioning, and provides you with a world that is worth saving, even if it's getting destroyed by itself through the corporate greed. And at the end of it, we have a story that the Doctor is the killer of the enemy in the story. The pit, everyone says the Doctor was the killer at the end of that story, but wasn't in terms of destroying that system. And it makes me think about how people perceive the pit, and this feels just like the good pit. This, to me, in terms of that aspect of covering what happened in this time and space a companion wants to know from her past. The Doctor as a manipulator and ultimately doing something that he shouldn't be doing, and sets the tone about what people think the Doctor is within this range. It all comes from Lucifer Rising and not the pit. But a lot of the things that people think of notoriously just gets dug and thrown into the pit when it should be probably with Lucifer Rising, because like we say, this is a good book. I really enjoyed reading this. But those negative aspects and the more complex aspects that the pit tries happen within this, for good and for ill. Alistair, do you have any parting notes or anything?
No, I think I might have mentioned this. I did enjoy this book. You're right, there's some moral ambiguity in there and things that the pit is known for that we should probably be blaming Lucifer Rising for, but the characterisation, the writing, the pace, the way it was all put together, I'm more inclined to forgive this book than I am the pit. Yeah, it's guilty of, you're right, it's guilty of the same things as the pit is, just that this is well written. And you can forgive a lot of things if it's well written. Mm-hmm. And that bothers me more than I care to say. But yeah, there's my parting shot.
I know you said it's a parting shot. Can I ask both of you, because you both said that this is your favourite new adventure so far, if there is one thing that you really liked about it? Because we keep going on about the things we don't. What's the one? If there's one thing you want to pick that you thought was really good about it, what would you go for?
The one thing I will say, it feels like a Doctor Who story. It feels tangibly like an actual Doctor Who story that I can visualise, I can see happen, and properly enjoy. I mean, I think when we talked about Cat's Cradle Witchmark, I was more positive, I think, than anyone has probably ever been about that book, because it felt like a Doctor Who story, as bog standard as it was, and as down the road as some of it might have been. It just felt like a Doctor Who story. It felt like something you could perceive this character dynamic be involved in terms of the Doctor and Ace. This feels a natural evolution of those characters, but also at the same time is a Doctor Who story with a proper, like, I don't want to say 70s style base of people, because it's not that. Even it feels genuinely like something more like from the new series. Like, it is 15 years ahead of its time to have something like the Satan Pit style sort of unit of people, and it has the Doctor doing a lot of doctory things, but also like almost what feels like direction of plotting, of like we were saying, having the Doctor just there at the beginning, being like, da-da, he's coming in with the action straight away. Something that feels like you would see in a very tightly made like new series episode or something like that. It has all these beats that just bring to life a book that could easily be something from the new series, in a way that is exactly the direction the new adventures ought to go, because this is taking some of those elements, classic base, classic ideas of corporations taking over, whatever, but throwing it into a new sphere, into a new style that feels, relative to the future, not just trying to remake a story of the past. Like, I've talked on other podcasts about books that do that, like The Plotters by David Agnew, is is a book that is a perfect slice of First Doctor season 2 stuff. But that's all it is. It's a perfect slice, re-encapsulating that style and period of the 60s. This book isn't trying to re-encapsulate something like that. Like, I watched Colony of Space recently, and yeah, sure, we've got a base of folk on an outside planet. We've got the IMC. This book takes that stuff and puts it into a modern spin, into modern sensibilities, into mature ways of writing, characterization, pacing that is more suitable for the future of what the show then actually does. And that's what I find most exciting about it. It's truly a new adventure. It's truly doing something with the franchise of Doctor Who in a new way, that we now recognise that, because there's beats that we can absolutely say, like, oh, it's like the Satan Pit. Oh, it's got, you know, aspects of the Doctor being confronted about his nature of manipulating people, like he did in Stolen Earth, Journey's End. It's got all these ideas and things that we can hark to, but at this time when it came out, I assume, was a very innovative thing. So yeah, that is my little rant as to why I do enjoy this book as probably my favourite new adventure so far.
For me, there's 3 points. One, which we covered already, was the death of Paula. That was just beautiful writing. The second point was the idea that they bring up casually while the Doctor's locked away, is that the Doctor impacts everyone around him, including his companions, and that maybe he's low-level brainwashing them to think he's a good guy. Bloody massive idea, dropped in casually, left to percolate. That was nicely done. And thirdly, it was the Doctor, when his juggling was interrupted by a Legion, and one of his balls disappears into one of Legion's dimensions. The Doctor just casually reaches in, grabs the ball, brings it back out, and it's like, that's such a quiet declaration of power. It's done without any...
Yep.
It was pitched perfect. It was a reminder that the Doctor is the most powerful being in the room, and it was pitched in amongst the time when he was being a clown and laughing about. It was just so McCoy. It was pitch perfect McCoy. Yeah, those are my 3. What about yourself, Alex?
That's a brilliant choice, because it's the punchline for we've just had the Doctor standing on his head and juggling the balls on the soles of his feet while gargling the Star Spangled Banner, and you go straight from that to actually I'm a little funny man, but I'm also, as you say, incredibly powerful and incredibly knowledgeable, and I think it's the mixture of Andy Lane and Jim Mortimore that you can see here when you look at their later novels, in that the world building is phenomenal, and some of it is very grim, but also there are all these marvellous characters, and it's just so funny in places. And I really like my Doctor Who to be funny in places, as well as having... I love the world building. They're just these brilliant ideas. Sense of wonder, science fiction. I don't read a lot of it. It's not always my thing, but sometimes it just does it for me. And this, I think, is such a wonderful example. And as I said, the sweep of history. So it's when you see the sweep physically in your head, but also this depth in history, but then it zooms in and it's got the characters as well, and I can remember it with a lot of new adventures. I have memories of reading them in a particular time and place, and often I would go and campaign in by-elections and I'd be hitchhiking, so I can often remember reading new adventures at motorway service stations, thinking, will no car ever turn up and give me a lift? So I can remember which by-election I was on my way to in middle of '93 reading this, and it's still just a really good bit of Doctor Who, and I loved what you said, Anthony. I thought that was that really encapsulated a lot for me, and particularly a lot of it. The Satan Pit was written by 2 New Adventures authors.
Yeah.
So you can see that they probably wrote this and thought, okay, yeah, we'll have a bit of that, as well as lots of their own things. But it does have a similar feel, even to a moon orbiting a giant object, which is tethered in place in a strange way. But if I may share with you, one of the things that I do to try and cope in the world's horrors today is I tend to post on Blue Sky on this day anniversaries of things that I like to try and cheer me up and hopefully cheer other people up. And often I'll do it with new adventures. And earlier this year, I said, here are some wonderful things about Lucifer Rising and why I love it. And I was reskeeted by Andy Lane.
Mm.
So I can tell you what Andy Lane had to say about it earlier this year, which was his quote skeet was, very first idea was Cybermen abducting people from anti-gravity elevator shafts in an enormous spacecraft. At a later stage, a member of the Alpha Centauri race was going to be the main villain, heavily influenced by Jim and my love of Larry Niven and John Varley. Huge fun to write. So he still liked it, or at least he had fun while I was doing it, and I thought I'd share that with you because that way you'll get to. That's something that not a lot of people will have noticed. Just a blue sky skeet on a random day.
No, that's very nice to hear that he, can share that enjoyment still online because, as he should, because like we say, it is a proper glorious time of a book. It encapsulates what we want this series to be in a lot of ways. So, on that note as well, I guess we should see what other folks said on social media. So, I don't know if Alasdair, I think, did I send you Facebook? Was it?
No, you sent me WhatsApp. I've just found it on WhatsApp.
No, sorry. Did I send you the Facebook comments rather than the?
Sorry.
I think it might have been.
Yep, I've got the Facebook comments here. So
who do we have over on Facebook, Alasdair?
Right, first up we have Michelle Drayton Harold. Might have a listen in. Jim Mortimore is an old friend of mine from way back. Okay, I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah.
Replying to that was, we've got Neil Cameron. A good read. We know Neil, of course. Old drinking buddy of ours.
Indeed.
A good read. The idea of the dimensional beings was interesting, and the impending threat of the Daleks loomed large off print. Was well done. Then we've got Jay Millhouse, another familiar name. This was one of the great ones. Yep. Can't argue there. Gareth Rafferty, now he confirmed for us, is it a gerbil on his shoulder?
Yes, I think he confirmed it was a gerbil.
Yeah.
So Joe Ford, if you're listening, it's a gerbil.
Yep. So Gareth comes out with, there are visual moments in Lucifer Rising that I can still picture. The long fall at the beginning, the stomach churning space bridge disaster. It has some great ideas, like the planets themselves and the technology of similarities. I love that word. The narrative itself is a pleasure to follow, sometimes checking in on different characters stroke suspects in close succession, like the book itself wants to know what happens next. The Doctor is written brilliantly, something that would be consistent in Mortimer's books. He has these little peculiarities that mark him out. Ace's story comes to a head for the time being. Indeed, there would be dust-ups between the two characters in later books, but where I couldn't help thinking, didn't Lucifer Rising already resolve this? For me, the only bum note is IMC, who are so transparently horrible that they lower the tone. It's otherwise a clever, wonderfully written book. Yeah, no arguments here, and that's what I've got.
I guess that's maybe the point of IMC is just to be they do lower the tone because we think we're having not a quaint but a very murder mystery take place, and then big brutal corporation comes in and just bludgeons things and everything around it, like the nature, the people, everything. But I get what you mean, Gareth, about it being how awful they are, because they are very awful.
But that is agonisingly close to the truth, because having worked in science labs in universities and high schools, the second you introduce management to science, it goes badly wrong. Management does not take well to science and vice versa. They are different worlds, they are incompatible, and that's just what we're seeing here with IMC and the research crew. It felt quite real. Sorry.
Yeah. Alex, I think we've got some comments on Blue Sky and Instagram, if you have them.
Yes, I've got one from. It's all one word, but I think it's Ian Christ is on illustration. It's possible he has an exciting surname and it's Ian Christ on illustration, but I don't think so. Apologise if it is. And he says, I was looking forward to this one, as the cover promised me a story with a sense of wonder that reminds you of that feeling of looking up at the night sky as a child and wondering what that epic frontier really looks like. Did the book deliver on this? For the most part, yes. Some of the most interesting fun parts are where the authors use an existing scientific theory and play around with it to create a sense of awe or weirdness. There is, however, a bit of a tedious first half, where after a brilliant opening, the threat is left just a little too ambiguous before the murders start up again. That's interesting, because a lot of reviews I remember from the time liked the first half and then didn't like it when IMC came along. Anyway, also there is just too many characters, where only a few are given the time to develop while others are left as fodder. Certain scenes and characters could have either been combined or discarded. The structure is pretty sound, but the devil is in the detail. If nothing else, it's a breath of fresh air from the past few boring and self-serious pieces of rubbish we've had to deal with. Don't hold back. Love the unsubtle dig at easily the worst part of Love and War, though.
Oh yeah, I forgot that we had the lovelorn lad come back in some form of was it a ghost or something?
Yeah, so no, she never really loved Jan. Like, I wonder if Andy or Jim were quite fond of Sophie Aldred. Saying no, she couldn't have loved him. But sorry.
I mean, who could in that book? Honestly, it was.
I'm so sorry, Andy and Jim. I'm so sorry. Okay, we also have TV and movie Matt, whose picture is Alpha Centauri, which means he's an evil villain. And Alpha Centauri isn't always lovely, you see, they can be bad. But this one turned into Legion eventually. It was only this year that I realised that the cover is Ace, and not some strange, futuristic, ornate cultural mask with a golden halo headdress.
I mean, to be honest, even thinking it's Ace is... I'm looking at it right now in front of me, the book, and I get what you mean about this big halo, but also even the face, I don't quite see Ace in this style, apart from someone with a very tight ponytail. Yeah, it's a bit of an issue.
Yeah, there is a famous story. Actually, I'm not sure if it's been printed, so I probably shouldn't say it. I'll say it anyway.
Yeah.
There's a famous story about Jim did a cover for Blood Heat, and he was having difficulties getting a likeness of Sophie Aldred, so he found a way around it, and that's why Jeff Cummins does the cover of Blood Heat instead of Jim Mortimore. But when you get to Blood Heat, I might tell you that.
Well, Jim Cummings, because I showed my flatmates the cover of Blood Heat, and he was like, "That dinosaur, that's a really familiar design," and he brought up the inspired artist that perhaps Jim was drawn to from that. And I posted it onto the Facebook group for Doctor Who Virgin New Adventure Scene. Is this a thing? Is this where direct inspiration was pulled from or whatever? Jim responded saying, "Yep, that's." I just did. So it was very nice of him. I didn't want to drag him because it's a very nice cover, but he was just like, "Yeah, that's very blatantly where I just needed to get the design in from."
Well, if you see the Jim cover, if you zoom in carefully, is actually a sticky-on cutout photo of Sophie.
Oh, is it?
Because he couldn't quite get it right, and that's why they said, "Oh no, I think we better not."
Well, I mean,
at least that's how it was told to me.
I mean, I guess he's been. That's two parts of the cover that draw from different.
It still
bits.
looks good though. It was a nice cover, but
yeah, true. So that's who we have on Blue Sky and Instagram. Oh no, it isn't past Anthony. There's actually one more comment, and it's from Guernsey Nick, who's came in whilst I'm editing the podcast. So this is Guernsey Nick's comment. All I remembered from my first read 30 years ago was that the IMC were involved. Memory told me this was another batch of meh after the last two, but this turned out to be the best new adventure since Love and War, and managed to be the multi-stranded epic that the Pit and Deceit wanted to be. And is that a Neuromancer reference with a sky described in TV image terms? Which, yeah, I think there's a lot of Neuromancer references being thrown around at this time of the V&As. And also, as a PS on this, and after Joe Mrs. Ford was squeezing cheap innuendo out of my username, can I just top and tail such smut by pointing out some of us were old and born in the 1960s. So let's stop giving head to such comments. Duly noted. Nick, thanks again for your comment. On Twitter, we have a Dave Kitchen. Dave says, I remember reading this one when I was just 13. Many of the cool sci-fi ideas really stood out as interesting, having left a lasting and positive impression. It also did a good job of setting out where the new Turbo Ace character was going to go. However, I also remember it being a very hard read, and it took me ages to get through. I keep meaning to give it another crack as an adult, so we'll be curious to hear your verdict as to whether that would be a worthwhile exercise. Which I think, given our verdicts across the board, yes, Dave, go read it. Go read it. Whatever part of Africa you're currently journeying through, just bring it. Find a copy somewhere. Maybe it'll be under a carpet in a relay station in Joss. Who knows? You can find it somewhere, hopefully. Who else do we have here? We have Joe Ford. Joe says, a big butch sci-fi novel with some troubling moments and retconning. It's like Deceit, but written by two people who can actually write. I like this a lot. It feels weighty and imaginative. The twists are great and the world building's sublime. Another wank fest of a cover, mind. It's not too much of a wank fest. Like, Ace is wearing some kind of flowing design. That's something compared to Blue Nox that we had in the Pit. Who else do we have here? Oh, we have Michael Storm, who says, the tiny 7th Doctor in the bottom corner of the cover never ceases to amuse me. Which, yeah, I don't know how to feel as to why there's a comically tiny 7th Doctor at the bottom right corner of the book. But sure, happy he's there. I don't know if it's contractually you have to have the Doctor on the cover or not, because we've not had him in the last one. We didn't have him facing the book front on the Pit. Yeah, maybe just we need to remind people the 7th Doctor's here, so here he is in a tiny, tiny corner. Kevin Bianco says, I read it recently, good concepts, but where is the Doctor? He is so unimportant to the plot, he might as well not be there. Also Ace, she can do one. I hated her on this novel. He's not holding back. In fact, he's not holding back in his second bit of this. Give me Paul Moggs or Johnny Morris EDA any day. I mean, yeah. I think the Doctor's there. He appears quite quickly. But, you've mentioned some good writers there as well, Kevin. I very much agree about their EDAs as well. And finally, I think it is. Yes, it is, finally. Gareth says, I think part of me is still queasy about that space bridge collapse. A great book. Yeah. Like, that the descriptions of that action scene and the descriptions of when everyone's basically, it's like annihilation, where everyone's turning into different DNA'd monstrosities and different formations. it does that same sort of quick chapter cut to different people, and they really can write a good sort of tense action scene, or horror scene as well when it comes to that part with the fields changing. So yeah, very much agree with Gareth there. So after a record, I think this is going to be the longest episode ever, actually. But it deserves it. I think it deserves that discussion, that praise that it deserves in bucket loads, to fill that pit of despair that we have been experiencing for the past while. So, on that note, I just want to thank Alex for joining us, and if anyone can find you anywhere online, where can they find you?
Most often on Blue Sky. I'm still posting occasionally on Twitter, but mostly to occasional cheery things and occasional retweeting things that its evil fascist owner wouldn't agree with. Mostly pro-queer and trans stuff, because it's just become a horrible place. I do have a blog called Love and Liberty, which unfortunately in a terrible 1990s Doctor Who way has been on hiatus for quite some time, but there's about 15 years of stuff on there, and one day I will get back to it. And other than that, I'm a middle-aged Doctor Who fan who doesn't have a podcast, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, it was an oversight, but I have, as I said earlier, this year I have put myself out, or put my toes in, and I've guested on a few people. So I am also, most notably, as you just mentioned, that this is your longest episode. I was the longest episode on Cy Hart's Library of Impossible Things, and the only one that's so long he's had to split it into 2 episodes. But you can also hear me guesting on the Exton Moss Experiment, talking about a series from the 1960s called Undermined, which absolutely no one will have heard of, which I describe as fascinatingly incoherent, and on their spin-off Kinky Boots about the Avengers. And I had a lot of fun, despite it being a very grim but also funny episode of Down the Line, about the brilliant World War II lifeline drama, Secret Army. But yeah, mostly I just say, here are some nice things. Oh, and then I'm going to mention politics and get really cross on Blue Sky, because that's how I cope with life.
Fair enough. But thank you once again, Alex, for coming on. And Alasdair, a pleasure as always to have you here.
Right back at you, Anthony. Always fun.
Thanks everyone for listening, and we hope to hear from you all soon. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Too Broad and Too Deep podcast. You can email us at toobroadtoodeeppod@gmail.com, that's with the word 2, T-O-O, or you can contact us on social media at toobroadtoodeeppod, and that's with the number 2 on Twitter and Instagram. You can also see us on Facebook at Doctor Who Too Broad and Too Deep podcast. See you all soon.